sea swallowed the world above with a hiss of steel and salt. Once the hatch sealed, there was no turning back. A submarine is a coffin by design, airtight, pressurized, a vessel that demands trust. Every clang of the metal hull echoed like the tolling of a bell, each sound a reminder. There is no escape once the ocean closes in. The year was not important. Whether Cold War or modern shadow mission, the sea never changes. What mattered was that 58 men were locked inside a steel beast designed for silence. Prowling below the waves, they called her the Halcyon. The mission brief was simple. Surveillance run beneath the Arctic Circle. Slip past sonar nets and listen for whispers of enemy fleets. But the men felt the tension before the first dive. Something rode with them, though none dared say it aloud. The commander, Captain Elric Dorn, was a man carved from iron, voice like crushed gravel. He gave the order to descend with steady calm, though his eyes betrayed unease when the moon rose full over the water before they sank. It glared red through the periscope, a bruised wound in the sky, as if warning them. Then the sea swallowed it, and the Halcyon plunged into eternal dark. Life in a submarine is a rhythm of recycled air and claustrophobic ritual. Metal bunks stacked like coffins, the hum of turbines, the hiss of valves, the pulse of sonar pings. There are no nights, no days, only the endless dim glow of fluorescent bulbs. Men become shadows of themselves after weeks submerged, their faces pale as wax, their eyes restless. But this mission was different. Fear pressed against them from the first hour. Heavy as the tons of water above, it began with Corporal Vey. He was a broad-shouldered mechanic, hands scarred from years of steelwork, a man the others relied on when machines groaned. Yet the deeper they went, the more unsteady he became. His skin burned with fevers that came and went in violent waves. He muttered in his bunk, teeth grinding, whispering words no one could decipher. His bunkmate swore he heard growls, not snores, but guttural snarls that raised the hair on his arms. By the third day, the changes could no longer be hidden. Vey's fingernails blackened at the edges, curling like claws. His eyes glimmered faintly, even in the dim corridors, as if catching light that wasn't there. The ship's doctor, an old man named Rourke, kept the others away, calling it a fever brought on by pressure sickness. But those who dared pass his bunk swore they smelled copper and musk, a feral stench that had no place in a machine that should have reeked only of oil and sweat. Still, the mission pressed on. Orders were orders, and Captain Dorn would not break them for a single ill man. But whispers spread faster than infection. Men avoided the mechanic's station. They prayed silently as they passed his bunk. They watched the moon in their dreams, that full red disk glowing beneath the waves, burning into their eyelids even though they had not seen it in days. On the fifth night, though time meant little down there, the first alarm sounded. Metal shrieked against metal. A hatch door in the aft storage had been dented outward, as if something inside had thrown itself against the steel with monstrous force. Crew rushed with weapons and flashlights, though rifles fire poorly in steel coffins. They found Vey crouched in the corner, shirt torn, chest heaving with impossible strength. His teeth were jagged, bloodied, as if chewing on metal. He hissed like steam escaping a valve, eyes glowing faint yellow in the dark. Dr. Rourke tried to hold him down, shouting that it was a fit, a fever, nothing more. But when Vey lifted the old man with one arm and hurled him into the wall hard enough to rattle bolts, no one could deny the truth. The men froze. Captain Dorn's voice roared above the chaos. "Restrain him!" Do it now, but chains meant nothing. Straps tore like paper, Vey's spine arched, bones cracking like ice under strain. Hair burst through skin slick with sweat, thick and black as the void outside. His jaw split open with a wet tearing sound. Muzzle elongating, lips pulled back over glistening fangs. The submarine shook with the sound, not from turbines, not from pressure, but from the howl that ripped through its corridors, echoing against steel, carried through every chamber like a curse. The men realized the horror then. The sea had not swallowed the moon, it had followed them down. The howl braided itself through pipes and cable runs, a feral note trapped inside iron lungs. Red strobes chewed the darkness into ragged frames, sirens bit down and didn't let go. The Halcyon did what all machines do when men fail. She defaulted to ritual, seal, isolate, survive. Bulkhead doors slammed shut, carving the crew into pockets of breath. Water condensed on the cold steel and rolled like sweat down the ribs of the vessel. Captain Dawn didn't run. He planted himself in the junction outside the aft storage. Boots braced, pistol leveled, useless, but it steadied the hands to hold it. "Hold that hatch," he barked. And the order traveled like current. 4 sailors heaved the wheel. The dog seated with a shudder. Something on the other side scraped along the door. Slow, deliberate, as if learning the shape of the metal. The scraping paused. A wet snuffle pressed to the seam. Then silence, fat and hungry. Dr. Rourke lay crumpled where he'd landed, breath rattling like a loose bearing, bones misaligned under his coat. He reached for Dawn, fingers trembling, leaving bright swipes on the deck. "Not fever," he rasped. "Blood." Wrong knot. Human. The words tasted like admission, and the crew who heard them swallowed their prayers with them. "Power to corridors only," Dawn snapped. "Shut down non-essentials, keep us quiet." The engineer at the comms station, Hale, killed the hum of everything they could spare. The Halcyon sank into a predator's stillness. Only the reactor's deep heartbeat remained, thudding through the keel like a ritual drum. The sonar man whispered from his console, voice 2 octaves too low. "I'm getting returns inside our own envelope. Say it plain. It's moving along the frame, sir, fast. Like it knows the bones of the ship." It did. Vey had lived in these guts. He'd bled for them, sweated into them, kissed them with wrenches and curses. Now, whatever wore his skin moved with the confidence of a man who had memorized every echo in the battery compartment. Petty Officer Lind and 2 green kids named Pike and Morales held position beside the cells, the Halcyon's heart if the reactor ever went quiet. Their chamber smelled of acid and old pennies. The air was warmer here, thick enough to chew. Morales was praying under his breath in Spanish, syllables ticking like a Geiger counter. The first sound came as a drip, then another and another. Pike lifted his lamp to the cross-bracing overhead. A long black thread hung there, bouncing with each vibration. It wasn't oil, it wasn't water. It was blood, dark and glossy, collecting into a swell that finally let go and splashed his cheek. Warm, he wiped instinctively and looked at his palm, disbelieving the color that never belongs below the sea. Something crawled above the catwalk. Too heavy for rats, too slow for a man in a hurry. Claws whispered across steel grating. A low chuff, almost a cough, rolled across the compartment, and with it the musk, copper and wet fur and old storms. "Back to the door," Lynn said, voice steady by theft. They edged toward the exit. The wheel handle was an arm's reach away when the lights flickered. Fluorescent stuttered. In the strobe, the shape was everywhere at once, a smear of muscle and teeth as if the dark itself had grown ribs. The lights steadied on a silhouette perched like a gargoyle on the upper brace. Long limbs, reverse-jointed power bundled under a hide the color of smoke. Its head cocked, its ears, wolf-keen knives, found their fear. Yellow eyes caught the light as if it were prey and reflected it back like coins sunk too deep. Pike screamed and lifted his rifle. Lynn's hand was faster, slapping the barrel down. The report in a boat is a suicide note. Everyone knows it. But the scream tore loose anyway, human instinct louder than training. The muzzle flared, the bullet spit sparks where it kissed steel. The echo hammered the compartment until it collapsed into a single new sound. A rush, as if the room itself sprinted at them. The beast dropped. The deck groaned under the hit. Morales shoved the door wheel. The seal fought him. Rubber lip suctioned by pressure, but fear lends torque. It started to spin. Lind opened up, 3 shots center mass out of desperation. Each thud a useless punctuation. The creature staggered, more surprised than hurt. Eyes narrowing, interested now. It hit them like collision. Lind went first, folded under claws that turned uniform into ribbons. Blood sprayed the bulkhead, a flower painted by an angry god. Morales had the wheel halfway when Jaws took his forearm. Bone cracked like wet driftwood. He kept turning with the other hand. Face a saint's mask of stubbornness. Until the second bite severed his prayer, Pike ran. The corridor beyond the door was a throat swallowing him whole. He slipped in blood, whose he didn't know, and went down hard enough to see stars that had never lived under the sea. He crawled, his lamp skidded away, rolled, and stopped against a boot. The boot didn't move. Captain Dawn knelt, caught Pike under the arms, hauled him upright. The boy's breath raked the air in shredded sobs. Behind them, the door slammed. Hale dogged it with a roar and threw the bar, arms pumping with panicked strength. On the other side, Something hit the steel. The door bowed. Rivets whimpered. Another hit. The bar screamed but held. Silence again, but not empty. Expectant. Like a surface that knows a storm is kneeling just beyond the horizon. Rourke crawled toward the smear of blood that had been Morales and touched it as a priest might touch relics. He lifted his stained fingers to the light. "Silver," he said, voice flat with old memory. "In the old stories, it slows them, doesn't stop, but slows." "We don't have bullets," Dorn said. Rourke looked up, eyes gone lucid in the way of people who see the end and finally accept it. "We have plates, cutlery, wiring lugs. Plating in the galley stores, melt it, hammer it. Wrap it around the tips of what you've got. Make the boat a church if you must. Confess later." Dorn's jaw worked, muscle ticking. He gave the nod that made war out of men. "Hail, secure sections, silent running, we make for the shelf. Keep depth. No one dies alone if you lock a door. You stay on the hinge." They moved. The Halcyon turned her face deeper, and pressure settled on her shoulders like a crown. In the corridors, the crew scavenged silver like gravediggers, spoons twisted into crude points, wire laced around knife spines, a cook's ladle hammered flat into a gleaming crescent. They fashioned their faith with shaking hands in the dark between compartments. The beast paced. It tested seams, listened to breath, counted heartbeats through bulkheads. It had learned the boat's language when it was a man. Now it spoke it fluently, each pad footfall an elegant conjugation of hunger. The first blood had been taken. The Halcyon understood. She shivered, and the sea outside leaned in to listen. The Halcyon drifted deeper, engines throttled to a whisper, as if silence alone could fool the predator inside. Yet every man aboard knew the truth. Sound carried differently here. Pipes groaned, blood dripped. Steel trembled. In a submarine, even fear has an echo. The crew had scattered into survival pockets. Each compartment sealed with bulkheads felt like a coffin lined with condensation. Lights dimmed to red. Corridors narrowed to veins pulsing faintly with borrowed power. The beast moved in those veins. It was part of the ship now, muscle inside the iron frame, pulse-matching reactor hum. Captain Dorn stalked the command room, pistol holstered, silvered bayonet clutched like a cross. He had faced depth charges and torpedo runs. But this was different. This wasn't war. This was myth made flesh, hunting in the hollow of man's proudest invention. He gave no speech, only the blunt weight of orders. "Stay sharp, stay armed, breathe quiet. We're not prey unless we forget how to fight," but prey they were. Petty Officer Hale manned sonar, eyes wide, hands trembling as green sweeps painted the screen. "Captain," he whispered, "I'm getting returns inside again. Forward, near the mess hall. A chamber now stripped bare. Silverware hammered into weapons. Only scraps remained. Plates clattering. Forks twisted into hooks. 3 sailors crouched there, guarding the space where rations were stored. Hunger and survival met in that chamber, and both carried weight. One sailor, Benson, leaned on his crude spear of wiring and silver spoons. "Maybe it's gone," he muttered. His words tasted of denial, and denial is thin armor. The reply came not in words but in sound, a wet scrape, claws dragging across the deck like chalk on a slate. The lamps flickered in the red haze. The shadow appeared in the hatchway. Massive shoulders hunched, fur matted with oil and blood. Teeth catching every pulse of light, its eyes burned gold. The beast inhaled, nostrils flaring. It smelled rations, sweat, terror. Benson panicked first. He lunged, thrusting his spear forward. The werewolf caught it in one hand, just one, and snapped it as if it were kindling. Silver bent, shrieked, failed. The beast hurled him across the mess. He struck the bulkhead with a crack that silenced him forever. The others didn't run. They fought because nowhere was left to run. One slashed with a knife rimmed in silver wire. Catching the beast across the muzzle, it howled, staggered back. Silver burned. The crew saw hope in the hiss of smoke where metal kissed flesh. Hope lasted a breath, then the wolf struck. Claws sank through the man's chest, tearing bone from socket. Blood painted the mess in a storm of red. The last man, young Price, screamed as he jammed his fork blade into the beast's flank. The creature spun, jaws opening wide. Price's scream turned liquid, cut short by a crunch that drowned out the alarms. By the time Dorn and a squad burst into the mess, the chamber was a slaughterhouse. Blood steamed on steel. Plates were scattered like bones after a feast. And the wolf was gone, vanished into the maze of the ship. Only Price's mangled hand twitched on the floor, fingers still clutching bent silver. The captain said nothing. His silence was louder than panic. He gestured once, sharp as a knife. Men began dragging bodies, whispering prayers, sealing hatches. But the Halcyon had become a graveyard of corridors, and the beast had already chosen its next path. Deep in the ballast tanks, water gurgled, sloshing as the submarine adjusted trim. 2 crewmen worked there, knee-deep in cold seawater. Unaware of the massacre above, one paused, hearing a sound he thought was a valve hiss. He bent to check. Something rose out of the water beside him. Not a man, not entirely a wolf, its fur slick with seawater, eyes gleaming like lanterns in the brine. It came from below, from the one place they believed safe. Teeth closed on his throat before he could shout. His partner's scream never reached the intercom, only bubbles as claws dragged him under. Above, the ship trembled, water pumps coughing, lights dimmed again. The hunt had begun in earnest, and the Halcyon, once proud, once unshakable, had become the beast's cage, and its larder. The Halcyon groaned as if she knew. Her bulkheads flexed like ribs under strain, valves coughed and spat, and the deck plates thudded with a second heartbeat that didn't belong to man or machine. Every sound was suspect. Every hiss of steam felt like a snarl pressed against the ear. The crew had split again, carving the submarine into scattered red-lit tombs. Each compartment now carried its own scent of panic. Diesel oil, iron sweat, blood already drying into the grain of the steel. Men whispered about mutiny, about surfacing despite orders, about smashing through protocol before the beast smashed through them. Captain Dawn refused them all. He stood in the control room, jaw clenched, eyes ringed in shadow. His hands were steady, though the air was thick with unrest. We surface, we're done. We stay hidden, we fight. You want daylight? Pray for it. Until then, the moon owns us. His words were iron. But even iron rusts under salt. The men sharpened their silver improvisations. Spoons hammered flat and wired onto bayonets. Forks bent into cruel shapes. The galley's ladles turned into crescent blades. They worked with a fever, sparks jumping, knuckles raw. Some swore they saw the metal glow faintly as if it recognized its purpose. But silver is no shield against whispers in the aft quarters. Men muttered that the beast wasn't just in Vay's body, it was in the ship itself. Pipes rattled like growls. The thump of ballast pumps felt like claws pacing in the dark. Even the sonar pings seemed to echo wrong, drawn out into hungry howls that lingered too long on the edge of hearing. Then came the scratching. It started in the ventilation ducts, tiny at first, like rats. But rats don't drag claws across steel. The sound slid overhead, slithered through the guts of the submarine, mapping every hiding place. Men clutched rifles, staring upward, following the sound as it crawled through pipes, vanishing into one corridor, appearing in another. The wolf had learned the ducts in the engine bay. Sparks showered as mechanics tried welding shut one of the grates. The smell of burnt metal filled the air, choking. One wiped sweat from his eyes and looked up. 2 yellow eyes burned back at him through the grate. Before he could shout, the metal gave way, ripped open like foil. The wolf dropped among them, a storm of fur and teeth. Screams bled into the engine roar. One man swung a silvered wrench, smashing into the beast's shoulder. It shrieked, not with pain but with anger, with insult. Claws raked across his chest, splitting uniform and flesh in a single stroke. Another grabbed a welding torch, fire hissing bright blue, searing fur. The wolf recoiled, snarling, but then lunged again, jaws clamping down on the torch itself, biting through hissing flame. Sparks spat as it chewed steel and spit it out, eyes glowing brighter when the others burst into the bay. The wolf had already retreated, vanishing back into the ducts with unnatural speed. What remained were 2 corpses and the silence of a machine bleeding from torn pipes. Steam hissed, oil dripped, the Halcyon moaned louder. A ship wounded from the inside, fear spread like current. Men whispered mutiny openly now. Surface, they hissed. Better the enemy above than this devil below. But Dawn's shadow filled the mess when he entered. Blood on his boots, silver bayonet gleaming. You open those hatches without my order, and the sea will claim you before the beast does. His voice was gravel, his eyes colder than the depths pressing in. Still he could not silence the fear. In the dim bunks, sailors swore they heard claws scraping inside the walls as they tried to sleep. Some heard breathing, wet, hot, steady. Just beyond the steel, one awoke screaming, convinced a muzzle pressed against his cheek through the thin metal. His bunkmates tied him down for his own safety. He kept screaming anyway. Rourke, the broken doctor, dragged himself on a cane, his ribs bound tight, eyes hollow. "It's learning," he whispered to Dawn. "It knows the ship better than us. Soon it won't just stalk, it'll herd, and herd it did." That night, or what passed for night, the Wolf slammed the forward hatches in rapid succession, denting one, tearing through another, pushing the men back, driving them down into fewer and fewer compartments. It wasn't random, it was corralling them. The submarine became a maze, and the beast was its minotaur. By the time the pressure gauge needles trembled at crushed depth, the crew realized what Rourke meant. They weren't holding the Wolf inside the submarine. The Wolf was holding them. The Halcyon was no longer their vessel. It was the beast's hunting ground, and the walls themselves had teeth. The ocean pressed harder with each fathom, an invisible vice tightening around the Halcyon. The hull sang with the strain, low groans, the protest of steel remembering it was never meant to live under such weight. Inside, men matched that sound with their own. Murmurs, ragged prayers, curses spat through clenched teeth. Fear had become part of the atmosphere, breathed in with the recycled air. It happened first in the torpedo room. 6 sailors, weapons ready, guarded the silver-lined warheads like priests at an altar. They were supposed to be the strongest defense the sub carried. A cathedral of destruction built for man's war, not for monsters. But even holy relics fail when the god they face is older. The hatch slammed open, steel wheels spinning as if turned by invisible hands. A gale of cold brine burst in. The beast had flooded ballast lines, channeling water where it should never be. Out of the spray it came, crouched low, fur slick, eyes reflecting red alarm lights like molten coins. The sailors fired, bullets cracked through the chamber, ricocheting off torpedo casings, whining in shrieks that drowned out shouts. Silvered blades slashed. One found purchase. Slicing across the Wolf's leg, smoke hissed from the wound, and the beast roared, a roar so powerful it seemed to shake the very pressure gauges. Then it retaliated. It moved faster than their eyes could follow. One sailor's throat was gone before he realized claws had touched him. Another was hurled against the ceiling, his spine snapping as easily as chalk. A third tried to ram a bayonet into its side, but the Wolf caught the blade in its jaws, bit down, and spat molten shards across the floor. The survivors fled, abandoning torpedoes, abandoning duty. They slammed the hatch behind them, but the water followed, seeping under, dripping like a countdown. By the time dawn arrived with reinforcements, the room was silent but for dripping water and the groan of strained torpedo racks. The warheads gleamed faintly, silver tips warped where blood and claws had brushed them. The beast had vanished again, leaving only proof of its disdain. The captain's face hardened into granite. He barked orders, sending men scurrying like rats through veins of the ship. But discipline was crumbling. Whispers of mutiny swelled louder. "We'll drown here," one hissed. "Better surface. Face charges, face anything." Another spat back. "You open that hatch. We all die faster." The Wolf heard them. It was listening, always listening. Down in the battery bay, sailors tried to steady the reactor's auxiliary feeds. Pressure alarms screamed. One man's hands shook as he twisted a valve. His nerves frayed raw. The valve snapped. Acid hissed. The chamber filled with choking fumes. They coughed, gagged, stumbled into each other, blind and desperate. And the Wolf struck there too, through smoke, through poison, through men already half dead. Its claws gleamed, silver scars still smoking. But hunger drove it forward. One man was lifted and slammed against the batteries, body jerking in electric seizure as sparks rained. Another tried to crawl through the haze, only to feel jaws clamp down on his leg and drag him screaming back into the cloud. When the alarms reached the command deck, Dorn's patience shattered. He seized Hale by the collar, dragging him close. "You hold this boat together or it becomes our coffin." Hale's reply came ragged. A whisper, "It's already our coffin, sir. The beast is just hammering in the nails." The doctor appeared then, limping, pale, eyes like glass. He clutched a twisted silver crucifix melted from spoons. "It's not random, don't you see? It's testing the hull, testing us. The Wolf knows the sea. It wants to take us deeper, and deeper they went." The Halcyon's ballast shifted on its own. Pumps sabotaged or broken, valves turned by claws instead of hands. The sub dipped, nose tilting. Men lost footing as gravity betrayed them. One fell down a ladder, bones splintering. Others tumbled across bunks. Blood smearing the walls, Dawn roared commands. But the sea didn't listen. The pressure outside climbed, needles quivering on gauges like nervous hands. Bulkheads popped, rivets spat sparks. The ship wailed as though the ocean had begun chewing it apart. Then the wolf howled again, and every man knew the truth. It was no longer just hunting them. It was dragging them with it, into depths where no moon should shine. And yet its cursed glow still burned behind their eyelids. The Halcyon was sinking, not by chance, not by accident, by will. The beast was driving them to its kingdom. The Halcyon had become a coffin on descent. Steel groaned in low dirges, rivets shrieked under pressure. And every man aboard knew one truth. The sea was patient, but the wolf was faster. Depth gauges spun, trembling in their glass, and with each drop the lights flickered. Not from power loss, but as if something in the dark was breathing with the ship, syncing its pulse to theirs. Captain Dawn chained himself to command. He stood at the chart table, face lit by ghostly green glow from the sonar screen. Every ping returned warped, stretched, as though the ocean itself were bending under some unseen weight. Hale's hands trembled on the console, sweat dripping into the keys. "Sir, the sonar's not right. It's picking up echoes inside us again." "Then it's still here," Dawn growled. His voice had ground down to gravel. "So long as I'm breathing, it doesn't own this boat." But breath was a fragile currency. In the midship quarters, sailors huddled with makeshift silver blades. One held a hammer wrapped in twisted spoon wire, another a crucifix bent from melted ladles. They were relics, not weapons. Still, they clutched them with the devotion of martyrs. Then came the scraping, again, this time not in ducts, not overhead, but underfoot. The deck plates quivered as if claws crawled along the belly of the submarine. One sailor pressed his ear to the steel, and what he heard was not movement but breathing. Deep, slow, patient like the ocean itself inhaling. The first buckling happened in Ballast Tank 3. Men stationed there heard the groans swell into a scream. Then a wet crack as steel split, water jetted in, slicing one sailor clean in half. The others drowned, screaming. Slamming their fists against sealed hatches, their cries bled through the hull, muffled by salt water until silence reigned. The survivors heard it. They all did. And silence became worse than screams. Dawn knew mutiny when he smelled it. He caught whispers, men ready to storm the hatches, to force a surface regardless of orders. He leveled his silver bayonet and said flatly, "You open that hatch, the sea eats you before the wolf can." His voice was stone, but even stone can crack under tide. Dr. Rourke leaned in, voice rasping through broken ribs. "The beast isn't killing to eat, it's killing to weaken us. It wants us to tear ourselves apart so it doesn't have to." Dawn clenched his jaw. He almost believed it then. From the far corridor came a sound no man expected. A knock. Not claws, not a howl, but a knock, slow, measured. 3 beats, a pause, then 3 again. Men froze, SOS. One muttered, "It's one of ours," but Dawn's eyes narrowed. "No, that's not code, that's mockery." And then the howl followed. A thunderous roar that rattled valves loose and popped light bulbs from sockets. Darkness swallowed compartments in chunks. Men fumbled with flashlights. Beams of pale light cut through red haze. Quivering in one beam fur, in another teeth, and then blood. The wolf struck fast. It tore through a bunk chamber, ripping hammocks from chains, dragging men screaming into shadows. One sailor's flashlight spun across the deck, beam rolling until it froze on the wolf crouched low, muzzle slick, eyes molten. The sight broke the man's mind. He laughed instead of screamed as claws gutted him open. The survivors sealed another hatch, locking comrades inside. They listened to fists pounding, begging for release, until the pounding turned wet and the begging stopped. Silence again, silence that suffocated more than any water could. Hale staggered into command, face white, hands trembling. "Sir, we're at crush depth. Another 100 feet and the hull won't hold." Dawn turned to the crew that remained. Half their number, faces gaunt, eyes hollow. He raised his bayonet. Silver glint faint in the failing light. "Then we make our stand here. No more running. We don't give the sea our bones without a fight." Rourke pressed the crucifix into Dawn's hand. "Make it count. Silver doesn't kill, but it slows. Buy the seconds you can." The submarine groaned again, louder now, as if the sea itself were laughing. The wolf howled in the ducts, closer, circling. The abyss squeezed tighter. The air thinned. Men gripped weapons made of spoons and faith, and in the red haze of the control room, Captain Dorn planted his boots wide, bayonet raised, ready to face the beast that had turned his ship into its kingdom. The sea outside wanted their bodies. The wolf inside wanted their souls, and neither had plans to let go. The Halcyon shuddered as though the sea itself had clenched its fist. Bulkheads wept rivulets, gauges trembled, and every man still standing knew they were balanced on the edge of two deaths, crushed by the abyss or torn apart by the beast. The control room was their church, their bunker, their gallows. Men ringed the chamber in a crescent, each clutching some twisted weapon of silver, fork blades, spoon knives, crucifixes bent into crude daggers. Captain Dorn stood at the prow of it all, bayonet gleaming faintly in red emergency glow. His face was carved in shadow, the lines of a man prepared to die but not prepared to yield. The howl arrived first, long, low, and rising, a sound that made steel quiver as if the submarine itself were terrified. It came from everywhere at once, ducts, bulkheads, even the deck plates under their boots, then silence, then impact. The hatch dented inward as if struck by a hammer the size of a god's fist. Once, twice, three times, the wheels spun against its lock. Shaking with unnatural strength, men braced it, pressing shoulders and weapons against steel, grunting under the strain. The fourth hit bent the wheel itself, and light burst through the seam, eyes glowing gold, burning through the gap. With a screech of torn metal, the wolf forced its way in. It filled the control room in a heartbeat, fur bristling, fangs glistening, claws dripping with the memory of every kill. Its head scraped the ceiling, its breath hot and rank, a storm of copper and rot. The men broke formation, screaming, lunging, silver flashed. The first blade struck its side. Smoke hissed where spoon metal burned fur. The wolf snarled, batting the sailor aside so hard his body shattered against a console. Another drove a crucifix into its shoulder. It staggered, bellowing, claws carving sparks into steel as it thrashed. Hope flared, brief as a match in a hurricane. Dawn charged. His bayonet struck deep, silver edge buried in the beast's chest. The wolf shrieked, twisting claws tearing across his arm, ripping him open to the bone. Blood sprayed hot, still he held fast, snarling into the monster's face like a wolf himself. Not my ship, not my crew. The beast threw him, bayonet tearing free. Dawn slammed against the chart table, vision swimming, ribs shattering like glass. But he dragged himself up, clutching the crucifix Rourke had given him. One by one his men fell. Silver slowed the wolf, carved black wounds into its hide, but never stopped it. It swatted them down like children, painted the control room in arterial arcs. Hale screamed as claws pierced his chest, sonar console exploding behind him in sparks. Two more men lunged as one, stabbing with makeshift blades. The wolf ripped them both open, entrails spilling across the deck. Only Dawn remained. He staggered forward, bleeding, lungs rattling. The crucifix burned in his hand, glowing faintly in the red haze as if the metal itself remembered sanctity. The wolf loomed, muzzle dripping, eyes molten. It tilted its head, almost curious. As if savoring the final kill, Dawn bared his teeth. With a roar that rivaled the beast's own, he drove the crucifix upward into its throat. Silver met flesh and smoke billowed. The wolf howled, a sound that shook the very sea. Its claws slashed, opening Dawn's chest wide. But the captain didn't let go. He drove the cross deeper, until the beast's shriek drowned even the groans of the hull. The Halcyon lurched, depth gauges shattering. Bulkheads gave way, water thundered in, a black tide swallowing blood and steel alike. The wolf writhed, pinned against the deck by Dawn's dying strength, eyes blazing even as the sea swallowed them both. For a heartbeat, silence, then the abyss claimed all. No wreck was ever found, no signal ever surfaced, only whispers that a submarine vanished, dragged into trenches deeper than maps dared draw. Sailors who dream of it still wake choking on brine, ears ringing with a howl that carries through the marrow. The sea keeps its secrets, but sometimes, under a red moon reflected on black water, sailors swear they hear it still, a howl from the deep echoing up from 3,000 fathoms below. And for those who hunger for more, step deeper into the shadows with our Ultimate Werewolf Horror playlist, linked in the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.